Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the final sessions of the 19th Annual CERIAS Security Symposium. Our next speakers, our tandem of speakers, are going to talk in an initiative here in the state, which I'm proud and pleased to say that I'm attached to somewhat. This last year was invited to be part of Governor Holcomb's Executive Council on Cybersecurity. And amongst that was then assigned to several committees. And one of those committees is headed by Doug and Chetrice. And so in that conversation was the initiative that maybe you guys should come talk about this. So while this is an Indian initiative, I believe that there are lessons that could be learned not just at the state level, but also at company levels and other organizations that could be duplicated. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Chetrice Mosley, who is the Cybersecurity Program Director for the state of Indiana, and Doug Rapp, who is the President of the Cyber Leadership Alliance in Indiana.
Thank you all very much. Okay, I think I'm going to double mic it. I don't mean to. I'm going to make this simple. As a woman, you don't realize, you forget that you might be mic'd, and so then you wear dresses, and it's not very easy to put mics on, so I'm glad for the backup. Is this on? Okay. Can you guys all hear me? Thank you very much, Joel, for having me here today. I've heard nothing but fantastic things about this organization, obviously well established. And when kind of looking at the models, when I took the position actually a year ago now, as the cybersecurity director for the state, and looking at how we as Indiana want to approach cybersecurity holistically, I definitely realized a couple of things. We are not always good as a state to recognize the significant amount of talent in our own backyard. With programs, with the people who are passionate about this topic, people who have actually come up with fantastic solutions for this topic, but may only be known in one area or one group. And so as I was looking at other states who were struggling with the same kind of thing, and then talking to such a great number of people here in Indiana and throughout, I mean, our council is made up of 250 members. That's not trying to beat any record. It's just I wanted depth in addition to breadth. A lot of times when you hear government councils, and you can raise your hand. Actually, I'll make people do something because it's after lunch, and if you're like me, if I'm not like doing something or having to listen, then I'm usually on my phone or starting to think about what's for dinner. So how many of you, when you hear government committee, government council, you think of a bunch of high up people to talk about an issue but not really get anything done? Right? I know. Yeah, me too. I mean, I've been a part of those frustrating type of councils where I believe in the cause. I think everybody around the table truly does believe in the cause as well. But you know, a lot of times we have policy people, we have academics, we have people who know it in theory, and either we then miss the operations people on that, so they come up with great policies that really can't actually be done. Or it's the other way around. You have a bunch of people who are operations people who come up and say, these are the solutions we need, but we don't have executive buy-in at a policy level, and so then things get stalemated and don't get done on that end too. So when I was given the responsibility of leading the charge with Governor Holcomb's Council on Cybersecurity, I wanted that to be different. I wanted it to be both. Which meant to grow, but it meant to grow to make sure that the right people were on the council at the right place and giving just the time that they need to give to be effective and add to the discussion. So, and I want to be conscious of time so that I can allow my private partner over here, also a council member, to be part of it. And I do appreciate Joel being on the council, and yes, absolutely, anybody who says they want to be on the council, I'm like, are you sure? Because you're going to get emails, and then you have to attend meetings, and then you're going to have to do stuff. So it's not going to be a council where you just show up and, you know, say that you were there, and then, you know, then that's really all it goes. So when I looked at states, as many of you probably have also looked in cross-state paths, a lot of states I recognized do really well in certain areas within cybersecurity, whether it's workforce development, cyber incident responses, the academic institutions, private sector collaborations, or state policy. I recognized that they were all moving a little bit, inch by inch, towards the big notion of cybersecurity that many of you have been talking about today. But really, how can we move together and bring the lowest common denominators, the local governments, the small businesses, the people who actually really need to know about it? As we were talking, somebody had brought it up earlier, how do we make it a business conversation and not just an IT conversation? How do we make it relevant to the local government person or the operations person and not just CISOs? Because as all of you know, CISOs are only at certain companies. A lot of them actually do not have those. They don't have an IT division. They don't even have a cybersecurity person, even if they do have an IT division. So how can we provide those type of resources but still be respectful of the nuances of the sectors, the regulations, and really have the right subject matter experts providing the true to be able to implement true solutions to the problem. So what we developed with the Executive Council on Cybersecurity is really a full ecosystem. We have Governor Holcomb started it in July of last year, and just in the last 6 months, this council has done more than I'm grateful because of the volunteers on the council than I haven't come across any other government entity, and I know Doug we've talked about that too, because of the type of value that people bring to the table. And so what it is that we've divided up into verticals of critical infrastructures that we wanted to focus on in year one. Granted, there are others that are missing on this, but we wanted to kind of test out things first. And then we realized that there were things, cyber hygiene items, emergency services, public awareness training, cyber sharing, policy, that would go across the sectors. So why would we have just one person represent everything in that area? Why not gather somebody, for example, in public awareness and training? Our chair there is the executive director of Hoosier Press Association, somebody who understands what they're trying to convey to the media from the media's perspective, coupled with a co-chair that is a 4-year veteran of public relations and marketing, so somebody who is trained on how to get information out. And I say that because a lot of what we're talking about is public awareness, right? It's education. It's how do we really get it to be valuable to the regular person who's not an IT person. And so when you talk about cyber stats, they really kind of turn it off. And unfortunately, how do we kind of cross that? Another one that would be example and probably relevant to a lot of people here is the workforce development team. So when I put together that team, I needed it to be effective right away, because is it a concern? It's not only a concern from how do we establish, and from the state's perspective, one of the proposals that the team is putting forth for the governor is to make NICE the standard across the board for Indiana and the expectation. How do we do that, right? And so we need to do that K through 12 as well as higher education, as well as looking at workforce development programs. So we have our Department of Workforce Development sharing that, but it isn't just enough to have Department of Workforce Development, which typically would have been the person leading that effort. Their co-chair is Department of Education. Because a lot of times I have found that in a lot of these discussions, they get so far in some great ideas, but they're not able to actually go forward because they now need another half or another section that they may not have brought early on. And so we kind of almost have to start all over, and how frustrating is that? And in a situation such as the needs and the concerns that evolve around cybersecurity, we're already behind the curve. And so having to not only realize that, and I'm very lucky to work for a governor and leadership at the state that recognizes that it isn't going to be a one entity solution. The state of Indiana cannot solve the state of Indiana cybersecurity problem. We would be wrong to even try. The state of Indiana needs to work with all the other people, such as our private sector partners, our educators, our federal partners, our local governments. We need to work together and be okay that other people have significant and great solutions, and let them go and run with it and be empowered with it. And then we just have a central framework in which we can help and feed off each other for efficiency for their sake. As well as for the state of Indiana. Because at the end of the day, the end user is you, and it's me, and it's our kids, and it's the people who are coming to Indiana as a business. It's people who are coming to Indiana to work for Indiana. So the ecosystem approach is what, well, other people in other states are now calling the progressive model of Indiana, which I'm taking as a great positive. A lot of them are looking to see how we get this moving. Real quick, one of the ways that we're getting this moving, and to Joel's point, have to go to committee meetings and so on, but these meetings and the committees are all tasked with actual things that they have to do. So it isn't that emergency services and exercise group or people, presidents and CEOs and CIOs of energy or healthcare are coming together to talk about cybersecurity, because then I just really made that one government council assumption 20 of them. What it is that every single one of them has done it already, had created research, created executive summaries from their perspectives, from their subject matter expertise. We have hundreds of years within each of these groups that are providing expertise and resources and templates and things they've done for their Fortune 500 companies that they're like, strip our name off of it and go give that to the local government and small business. Because they realize that they are being the weakest link, are their weakest link as well. So it strengthens their posture as well. And so each of the groups are doing research. Each of the groups are creating deliverables, actual deliverables of trainings, of programs, of proposals for things that they feel the state of Indiana needs or their sector needs. We have 70 deliverables coming out of this council in 6 months. And probably about half of them will be completed by September of this year. And the goal is that we provide the governor a portfolio of those deliverables and actually start implementing and sharing that information out with everybody, those underserved populations, and figuring out how we move that to the next level. And then the next section of that is a proposal of how we go and make this better, whether that's working with other states in our region, whether that's furthering and deepening our partnerships with companies like CLA, obviously academic institutions like Purdue, Ivy Tech, IU. And so that is the goal of this. So it isn't, and I'm very happy to say, a group of people who are just talking. It's a group of people who actually really, because they've shown interest and committed to this, have really kind of had their feet to the fire saying, all right, but you said you're going to bring something to this, so what are you bringing that can benefit everyone, whether it's in your sector or across the sectors or for your group? So so in addition to the plans of the deliverables of the more than 70 items and implementation, so they're answering the hard questions right now. They're in that phase right now. How much is it going to cost? What resources are out there now? Is there policy that's going to be needed? How can higher institution or higher ed help? How can we start integrating these type of discussions, like what was being discussed earlier, into the younger crowd, so that it becomes the normalcy and not what we're trying to pull out of people. So so that's kind of basically the big one. I know that, and I'm very lucky that Purdue's a partner with me and the council on developing a scorecard for the council and for the state of Indiana. I am a big believer in not just creating a deliverable, but I personally need to be able to look my leadership and be able to provide statistics to the governor and say, these items did this for these people. And so how do we measure that? Looking at other states, talking to other institutions, no state has been able to actually measure their effectiveness of a governing type of council body and volunteer group the way that we are, and be able to show that they actually did something, moved it along outside of the one area. But across the board for all the state of Indiana, for all the underserved, that's what we're looking to do with that scorecard. So I appreciate Purdue very much in helping with that. I think that's about it for right now. I know we're going to leave a few minutes to take questions. I'm sure people have some questions with regards to what's coming of the council. But with that, I think a hallmark of what the council does, and a big portion of my own philosophy, is that I'm only as good as the partners that I have and the people that I work with. And so with that came a real emphasis from a state perspective to make sure that we have a strong private partners on the council, and be okay that they go and do great things, and not try to stifle that, and if anything, try to grow that and try to figure out how to facilitate that growth. Without always needing to have, and I say that because I know that there are other states, and even Indiana has played that role before, where not necessarily in this one, but where it has to have the Indiana seal on it. It has to have somebody's name on it, and I'm not a believer of that. I really just want people to go forth and work together and be able to work within a framework, so we're not having 10 parallel efforts, which was what was happening before as all of you probably already know. So with that. Doug is a perfect example of a partner on the council from the private side of it, so he can speak to those initiatives on that end.
Thanks, Chetrice. Can you hear me? Great. So I have to say that beginning a while ago with the state of Indiana, under Mike Pence, when he first kind of came up with this concept, and then carried on by Governor Holcomb, that I was a little bit nervous about the concept of a large cybersecurity council nested within government. All right. So having spent 34 years in government myself, I understood how effective government can be sometimes. But I was very encouraged when Chetrice was appointed the director of it. Let me say that there is nobody in the state of Indiana or beyond that could have pulled off what Chetrice has done at the state level, building a team, and a true team, a public-private partnership, and that's kind of a catchphrase these days, but a true public-private partnership where the state doesn't have veto authority. They actually listen to their subcommittees. 250 people, over 20 subcommittees, 70 deliverables in 6 months, and these are actionable things. I've been in the business for a while, and these are things that are actionable. They are things that are getting done. So I'd like to thank Chetrice as a representative of all our state leadership for the council and for being such a great partner. Chetrice and I have a long history. I was in uniform for a long time, and towards the end of my career with the military, I was with the Indiana National Guard as an AGR. I was a civil military specialist, and I worked on disaster planning and contingency operations. And I had the great fortune of having cybersecurity dropped in my lap, literally dropped in my lap. I always tell this story about Major General Barger, who's a phenomenal leader and a great man, a personal mentor, who went out to D.C., and the hot topic was cyber forces out there. And he came back to a state that were a bunch of knuckle draggers like myself, infantry guys and artillery guys and combat arms. And he looked at his staff and he said, "I want me some of that cybersecurity." So that's almost a direct quote. And the operations officer, the state operations officer at the time, my boss, he came back to the office scratching his head, and a man who's led more, National Guard officer who's led more troops in combat since the Korean War. This guy led 6,000 troops in Afghanistan from all over the world. And he came back and he said, "I have no clue what to do with this." So he brought all of us in and he said, "Hey, the boss wants to do a force structure bid for some cybersecurity forces." And it's like, "Anybody know anything about cybersecurity?" And I went, "I do," because I saw what was happening out there. The long and the short of the story is that we started down a path where, with a single workshop where we brought in people like Chetrice, at the time, her boss, Carolyn Mays Medley, who was a pioneer in utilities, in security and utilities. And we brought in private sector people, Rook Security, Pondurance, Kinney Group. We brought in state and local nationals and just started meeting, really, and just started talking about things like, hey, what's going to happen if there's an earthquake and all these high-speed pipelines get severed, you know, what's going to happen when the fuel runs out and we can't power our computers that are now powering everything else? And we started having those conversations. And we've evolved from that into probably the most effective and best partnership that I've ever been involved in, a true statewide team. So again, the Cyber Leadership Alliance, we are a 501c6. We are an industry organization. We represent the members of our organization. It's very easy to become a member. It takes an MOU. There's no fee. So, but we represent about $25 billion worth of security interests in the state of Indiana through our Indiana CISO Forum. Some of you who attend those forums are here in the room. The Indiana CISO Forum gives security professionals a trusted environment where they can have very candid conversations about their architecture, about solutions, about vendors, without the influence of those vendors or other outside interests. So that's run by Leon Ravenna, who's the CISO for Car Auctions, one of the smartest men I know, and he is fanatical about protecting that group and ensuring that we have that trusted environment. So we are really a voice for the industry. And by the way, we want to work ourselves out of a job, so we hope someday, I call myself, I've got friends who call themselves CyberEvangelist. I call myself a cyber optimist. I look out across a room like this and I see some of the most amazing people that I know. Great minds, great leaders, people that are in the trenches every day. And I have hope that we're going to make the world a safer place and that we're going to solve some of these incredibly complex problems. So I like to consider myself a cyber optimist. I also lied to Chetrice. I told her, you just bring one slide, I'll bring one slide, but I can't help myself. I'm a cheerleader for the state of Indiana. So Secretary of Commerce a few years ago commissioned a study, a cyber economic development plan for the cybersecurity industry. Part of that was a series of town halls where we went around across the state of Indiana, solicited input from everybody. We did them down in Evansville. We talked to CISOs, we talked to politicians, we talked to economic development people. We talked to anybody who would show up at the meeting that thought they had an interest, academia. We talked to them all, and we conducted a survey. And you'll be happy to know that the #1 greatest asset, according to this survey, is Indiana's academic institutions. So throughout that, innovation and entrepreneurship also was up there. So the innovation that's coming up, training and exercises with the facilities like we have. I don't see the uniforms anymore, but Muscatatuck and the cyber physical range down there. So Indiana has amazing assets that we don't brag on enough, and I'm glad that CERIAS has afforded me this opportunity to get up here and brag. So now I want you all to notice that I've just committed a mortal sin. I'm showing the CIO from Indiana University at a Purdue group.
You're showing that the lesser places can participate.
We're all inclusive, So these statistics are a little bit old, and actually the Department of Education and the Subcommittee for Workforce Development is actually updating these. But at the time that this was done, there were 31 colleges and universities offering curriculum or cybersecurity education here in the state, 6 cybersecurity centers or cybersecurity research centers, and 7 cybersecurity centers of excellence. I think the latest one was Ivy Tech with a 2-year CAE. So what we realized is that we've got something here. While other people struggle with the workforce, and certainly Indiana struggles with workforce too, we have an educational pipeline that we can leverage. So I doubt you'll find many other states other than states like California that have more educational institutions that are teaching cybersecurity content. I'll brag about a couple more things that are going on here. The innovation that's coming out of our community. These are just a few of them, and I'll get criticized for not putting everything up there. There'll always be somebody that I forgot, overlooked, or there just wasn't room enough on the slide. University of Southern Indiana with the Southwest Indiana ISAL. It's a partnership between that university and businesses down there, primarily the utility provider Citizens Energy Group, where they have industry people working with their students in the SOC. The Indiana ISAC, I don't think Tad Stahl's here today, but originated by concept by Hans Vargas, who just left, unfortunately, carried on through Tad Stahl, DeJuan Neely, Nick Sturgeon, who was here, who's back here somewhere. It is an extension and a partnership with Purdue, an extension of IoT to service small governments and schools. Indiana University, the Omni SOC, which was recently just launched in the global NOC. And then the Scatatuck Urban Training Center, which is a military facility. It's an entire town that at one time, when we were a different country, we institutionalized people there that had physical or mental disabilities. So it was a total enclosed town that now has been turned into a training venue, which includes dark fiber running to working facilities, power generation plants, water treatment plants, buildings, jails, stadiums. They even have a camel. True story. This is where Indiana's been and where they've gone. So some of the great things that have taken place here that I just don't think people realize is, we'll start down at the bottom with the past. CRITEX, which was a cyber physical exercise, kind of really the culmination point of a lot of things that have happened in that public-private partnership with the state. Not that there weren't, obviously there are many other people that were doing groundbreaking work in cybersecurity, but really the hallmark of the public-private partnership. CRITEX was conceived in a bank vault office of Rook Security, a private industry in conjunction with Cyber Leadership Alliance, the Indiana National Guard. Let's see, who else was there? A few other people that were there when we just finally kind of got fed up and said, you know, somebody needs to do something about infrastructure and start thinking about protecting our infrastructure. What that evolved into was a world-class exercise, cyber physical exercise that had state, local, federal partners all the way. I mean, it was pretty incredible. Where we brought in the 6 largest water utilities in the state of Indiana, or the 6 major water utilities in the state of Indiana, and we had their operators try and detect and defend against, or at least detect, a hack into a working industry standard SCADA system in a functional water treatment plant. And this was to the point we had role players out there, created a hammering effect by cycling the pumps, and actually had a pump that came out of the ground that was spewing water. It was pretty amazing. It was an amazing event. So that was kind of a hallmark event for us that I think spurred a lot of our relationships, that birth by fire, working through that exercise and working through all the political stuff. Yeah, and there's Nick right there. So everybody, Nick. So speaking of the Indiana ISAC, Nick was a huge part of that. But we formed relationships there that we took with us to the different entities and agencies that we've gone to, whether public or private, and we've kept those alive, and that's really how we're able to create a successful public-private partnership. Cyber Defense Summit was conducted here between Indiana University, Purdue University, and Muscatatuck Urban Training Center. We brought in almost all of the service academies, many of the military assets, DHS, S&T, others brought them here and really kind of highlighted what was going on in Indiana. It was our first baby step at really starting to promote Indiana. Cybersecurity State of the State, which was a concept. We brought in 6 experts from different verticals that were important to the state. And in the State House, we briefed elected and appointed officials on what the state, what those industry experts felt the state of the state was in those areas. So we began the process of educating legislators and educating leaders. What's going on today? I talked a little about the Indiana CISO Forum, so I won't beat that to death. The Israel Cyber Tech Delegation, annually we form a delegation that goes over and meets with our partners in Israel. We're pretty impressed with the fact that they're punching 35 times their weight in cybersecurity. And we like to think that innovation is born out of research. It's born out of companies that are doing things, and in the case of Israel, it's born out of necessity. So we're very interested and have great partnerships with them, and we continue to go over and meet with them. Secure the Hill, we do that. That's coming up. We actually go out and talk to our legislators out in D.C. We've even gone so far as been asked to testify in front of subcommittees on public-private partnerships in workforce development. Cybersecurity Executive Council, we've already talked about cybersecurity town halls. We're continuing that tradition to go around and talk to and get people motivated and interested in cybersecurity around the state of Indiana geographically. You know, anytime there's a state capital, everybody else who is not the state capital thinks that everything revolves around the state capital. Last year, the year we did this, the first year we did this, we made it a point of not doing a cybersecurity town hall in Indianapolis. We actually just did it in all the outlying areas. So in the future, the Indiana Secure Technology Consortium is a group is a group of interested people that are coming together to form a catalyst for security in the Internet of Things. Indiana has made a huge mark in technology. What we're concerned about is, like technology and the tech culture, we want to rush headlong into technology, and we want to grasp those things with a focus on getting to market as quickly as possible, and that doesn't set conditions for security very well. So we're interested in getting ahead of IoT and the IoT craze, and ensuring that, and partnering with industry in Indiana that are in the manufacturing space to build security in from the ground level. The Indiana Cybersecurity Focal Point, I'll say very briefly that Indiana is considering creating a venue to consolidate some of the expertise in cybersecurity around the Capitol. Workforce Development Initiative, talked a little bit about that in partnership with Purdue, Indiana University, and other interested partners, IDOE, Department of Workforce Development, mapping a progressive pipeline of talent to incentivize them in the right places, to go to Indiana schools, to stay in Indiana, to live, work, and be educated here. And Cybertech Midwest. So we are in talks with, has anybody been to Cybertech in Israel or in Singapore, Rome, Panama, any of those places? So Cybertech, Indiana is hopefully working through the final terms of bringing Cybertech here for the next 3 years. So Cybertech Midwest, it'll be their only event that they hold in the United States. So we certainly invite you all back for that. And then
And just to add to that, it is, that is pretty much solid. So definitely save the date for October 23rd. That will be Indiana's first cybersecurity conference, where we'll obviously highlight a lot of what the council has done, but highlight our partners, highlight what Purdue's doing, and again, back to my first point, highlight what Indiana brings to the table in addition to the regional. So.
And the last thing is what I'm calling the SMB SOC, and that is an initiative that we're working with CERIAS on right now to roll out cybersecurity tools to our most vulnerable sectors of society, women's shelters, food pantries, those types of areas that if they were to suffer a breach or an attack, that it would instantly put them out of business, and portions, the people doing great works, we have an obligation to protect them. So that's a lot of stuff I've just thrown at you. So I encourage you to stop by and talk to me. I'm in the back and I've got the cool pins, so I'd be glad to give you one. So I'd bribe you there. So just on behalf of myself and Chetrice, thank you very much for allowing us to present here today and just brag on Indiana and the great stuff that we're doing. So we truly are the cyber crossroads of the United States. So thank you.